So thank you all for coming tonight. Tonight is to share some information regarding the reopening in Parkrose to in-person instruction, and to talk about the model that we are going to use starting April 5th for elementary students, and the week of April 19th for our 6th through 12th grade students. I'm going to share the information in the slideshow, and then I will open it up to questions, any comments that folks want to share tonight. And that will be after the slides. So I'm going to just go through the slides, and then if you have questions along the way, you're welcome to use the chat to ask those questions, and we'll do our best at the end of the slideshow to share our responses. So many of you are probably aware that this past Friday, March 12th, the governor released an executive order that specified the reopening for all kindergarten through 5th grade schools to offer in-person instruction on or before the week of March 29th. And also the executive order shares that all 6th through 12th grade schools will offer in-person instruction on or before the week of April 19th. The governor also ordered the Department of Education, ODE stands for the Oregon Department of Education. Those guidelines were actually released alongside the governor's order. And I will share with you tonight some of those changes of guidelines. So a couple of things about the governor's order. It does allow for ODE to create certain exceptions. One exception that you'll see tonight is that we will begin our in-person offering April 5th, because we will be training our teachers the week of March 29th through April 2nd. One of the challenges, but one of the things that we are offering to all families as an option is comprehensive distance learning.
Мы предлагаем всем семьям программу по дистанционному образованию.
You can see from the other requirements in the order that there is no requirement to pay staff who fail to work as assigned. We are expected to comply. State school funds are contingent upon compliance. And then the Department of Education are the ones that enforce to ensure that schools are opening. We did learn, if we are training the week of March 29th, that we can start on April 5th, and shared that with families via community letter today. For our elementary families, we did send a survey to ask families what their choices would be. And you can see that these survey results show those who've responded and who haven't responded. There are slightly more families who have asked for hybrid across the district. And there are some families who are planning to remain in comprehensive distance learning. Tonight, hopefully we'll clarify some questions you might have, some concerns, as well as answering any questions that you further have about the details that I'm going to share with you tonight. So we have about 1,200 kids represented in our elementary schools, and we heard from about 876. Of the represented families that did the survey, the general difference was 55% of our families said they would like hybrid, and 45% said they would like comprehensive distance learning. Families will be contacted this week. Teachers will start contacting families tomorrow to ask for your confirmation of choice. So regardless of what you said on the survey, we are going to come back to families and ask you again and confirm your choice from the survey, or you have the ability to change your mind and request either distance learning or hybrid based on what you're learning about how we're going to serve kids from April 5th to the end of the year, which is in the middle of June. I'm going to quickly share a video with all of you that shares from the student's perspective and also the family perspective, some of the safety guidelines that in-person instruction will be following. So you have an idea of what school looks like when kids come.
Your teachers are so excited to welcome you back into the classrooms. But as we come back into the buildings, there will be some new things to get used to in order to keep everyone safe. Let's go over them now. Before you come to school in the morning, let your grown-up know if you are feeling sick with a sore throat or a cough. Parents, please make sure to screen your kids before sending them to school. If they have a sore throat, fever, cough, shortness of breath, or loss of smell or taste, please keep them home and call the school to let them know your child is sick. School staff and nurses will then help you know when your child can return. When you get on the bus and when you get to school, there will be adults there to welcome you and help you know where to go. They will also be checking in with you to see how you are feeling that day. If you are feeling sick, it is really important that you let an adult know right away. We will all be wearing a mask when we are at school or on buses. Some people might also be wearing face shields. Before you get on the bus, enter the building, or enter your classroom, you will be asked to sanitize your hands. You will also be washing or sanitizing your hands after using the restroom, before and after you eat, and after you play on the playground. Your teacher may even schedule specific times during the day for hand washing. When we are all together, it is important that we remember to give each other space to stay safe. If you ride the bus, your driver will help you know where to sit. At school, there will be stickers and signs that will remind you to stay spaced out from others, and even arrows that will tell you which direction to walk. We will need to give each other space in the classrooms too. Desks and seats will be spaced out so that everyone has plenty of space to stay safe and learn. Your teachers will let you know other parts of the building you may be using, such as the cafeteria or the bathrooms, and how to stay safe in those spaces. You will also notice lots more cleaning going on. Custodians will be busy cleaning all of the surfaces and materials that we touch most often. Your teacher will also be cleaning tables and materials in the classroom. Your class will get to spend lots of time together. You and your classmates will receive instruction in your classroom and spend time playing outside. The same adults will be with you each day in person. However, while you may still see other teachers and staff such as your music teacher, they are likely to continue delivering instruction to you as they have been, through the computer, in order to help keep everyone safe. Some things are going to look different when you come back into the building, but by working to stay safe, we can all learn and grow together.
I did this the last time too. So I'm going to walk through now and talk a little bit about what preparation is going to look like. The video gives you an overview of some of the key components of how to keep a low risk environment at school. And that is the distancing, the masks, and of course, keeping students in small cohorts. So one of the challenges of the schedule that we present to you tonight is it's not ideal. It's not enough time. We would like it to be more, but this provides an opportunity to keep cohorts small and start slowly and safely. So our preparation for elementary hybrid that's coming up after the break. Teachers need time to prepare and participate in required what's called Ready Schools Safe Learners training for in-person support. This is multiple hours of training. So it is why that our elementary schools will not have school on March 29th through March 31st. That's Monday through Wednesday, to allow for preparation and training time. We will ask our teachers to provide some asynchronous work, which is assignments they would receive, but they just won't see their teacher those first 3 days. The teachers will also be responsible for developing the in-person cohorts and deciding what days students will be coming and how that will be organized. They also will need to be communicating with all of you and letting you know when your child would be invited to come to in-person. It will work in a very similar fashion for those of you who are with us tonight, wondering about middle school and high school and what that will look like. I mentioned the asynchronous work for students during the Monday through Wednesday. On April 1st and April 2nd, we will ask students to attend comprehensive distance learning from 9 to 11 to learn about what the new schedule will look like. If they're staying online, what the schedule will be. And they'll also receive some instruction for the end of that week. There's a lot to prepare for. And so we've worked with our labor partners to determine like the adequate time in preparation. So these bullets just highlight some of the key things that what the teachers will be doing and the staff will be doing while the students aren't in school. So I talked about the preparation week. So when we begin what we call hybrid in person, all students will begin that on April 5th, which is a Monday. All students will continue to access instruction online from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And hybrid students will be placed into cohort A or cohort B for afternoon in-person class. Hybrid students will be placed into cohort A, which will be Monday, Tuesday, or cohort B, Thursday, Friday. Students will attend in person from 12:30 to 2:45 p.m. on their designated days. And students will still attend the online class from 9 a.m. to 11:30. Most of our specialized instruction, special education, EL, music, will be provided online, regardless if a student's in hybrid or if they are in comprehensive distance learning. Why this plan? One of the key reasons why is there was significant concern from our stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, about the change of classroom teachers. The other model would have meant that we would have to reassign all the students who did not feel comfortable coming back to school. And we were concerned about putting them at a disadvantage of learning a new adult in a new system. And simply, we are a smaller district, and just capacity wise, that would have likely required many substitute teachers to fill in the gaps for distance learning. And in addition, would have likely not guaranteed that students in person would have had the same teacher. So another key factor is only a little more than half of our families indicated that they would return to hybrid. So we saw that there was a very even need for continuing to provide distance learning to a certain level and providing support for in-person instruction. Since we had the split of choices, this was the model that we felt would keep routines close to the same. And then also want to assure parents tonight, if you are starting with distance learning or you aren't sure, we are going to ask that you provide notice to the school of a couple of weeks if you want to return in person after our initial phone calls when we ask you your decision on distance learning or hybrid. I do want to say I understand that some parents have unique situations that they're trying to problem solve, and I will ask you to kind of refer to my office, and I'll provide some contact information that can help us problem solve these individual situations. And of course, we wanted to be sure that there was time for staff to provide 2 models. We specifically decided against teachers teaching online and teaching in person at the same time. We really felt like that, number one, it's a disadvantage to students who are online because it's very difficult for the teacher to pay attention what's going on online at the same time paying attention to the students who are in person. So we did not decide to use that model. If your child stays with distance learning, we would keep a similar schedule. We do have to release a little earlier simply because we need to get lunch to students and we need to prepare for students coming in person. Some students in distance learning will still continue to receive specialized instruction in small groups, and some students will work asynchronously on pre-assigned work. Lunch will be available on site to be picked up for distance learning. And then due to in-person support, we won't be continuing to deliver meals to bus stops because our buses will be transporting students. So what's changing? Students who are doing distance learning will have a less synchronous time. That means time with their teacher. We will be serving both online and in person. Students who do hybrid will see teachers in person 2 days a week. There is potential for that to increase over time. It has not happened yet, but social distancing standards are being discussed about possible changes at the federal and state level. But we have created a model that allows for all students to participate in person if they choose to do so. Wednesday mornings, another change is that we will only have a class check-in for all students on Wednesdays because working with our teachers, we need to provide time to do both. And this is much more significant work on the teacher's part to provide both components each week. Lunch will require pickup at the school site for distance learning. In-person students will be able to take meals home. So I want to be clear that we will provide meals and pass those out at the end of class each day. However, we have decided not to serve meals at school because the time is so limited. And mixing cohorts is another concern, right? The more places students go, the more mixing of cohorts there are. And this plan really focuses on students being in their classroom with their teacher and not mixing with other cohorts unless they're riding the school bus. Cohorting. So this term is really like who's going to go on what days. So there are a couple of district requirements that we have in place. One is we do have some staff, a limited number of staff, who are not able to work due to a medical exception. The district must accommodate their medical need, which means they will not be on site. There is a very small number of teachers who will not be able to provide in-person instruction, and they will actually receive support from another teacher. But again, this is not likely. Just a couple of teachers in the elementary grades are affected. Transportation needs, we do plan to provide transportation to the cohort in-person groups. There are certain bus stops, certain routes where there are a lot of students riding, and we cannot have more than 24 students on a bus to keep them distanced. So if we see that we have crowding on a bus, we may have to change cohort arrangements for specific students. We want to make sure that we're organizing cohorts knowing that most likely parents will want siblings together. However, I know that there are some families who may want different options, and we are definitely open to that. But we are definitely making sure that our teachers are aware of who that child has as siblings in the district. Specialized needs, we'll look at special education needs, English language needs, any other specific supports in placing. And then the teachers will make the final decision on that placement and contact families and inform you of what that will look like. Just a couple more slides and then we can help answer some questions that folks have. 6th through 12th grade students must be offered in person by the week of April 19th. Due to being well into the school year, and I have spent a lot of time over the last month talking with students, staff, families, some of our partners that work with us in the district. Some of the key things that were mentioned have been shared with me. Changing the class schedule and routine has an impact. Space and accommodating students and staff. This is much more challenging at the secondary level at our middle school and high school because there are more students and there is a little more space, but not quite enough space to accommodate in the same way that we are with elementary. And student schedules. For many of our students who go to our high school, they are working and have been working and going to school. Many students were concerned that they may have to stop working if the school schedule changes. So we are trying to create a plan that does not alter things considerably. So we have yet to work all of the details out of this plan because we were planning a limited in-person support in April. And with this directive, we are changing to universal access. So we will, our proposal will be to condense the current distance learning schedule into the morning hours. So all kids would have class in the morning hours, and then that would mean less online class time. Kids have talked about the exhaustion of being online all day, but that's not the reason for doing that. Our reason for doing that, it's really because in order to provide afternoon in-person support, which would be with one certified teacher at least one day. And again, this will depend on the number of students who choose hybrid, will be based on the number of days we can offer. Because we likely can only fit about 1/3 of the student population into the school to meet distancing standards. Cohorts will be organized based on class needs, and those would be in the afternoons of Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. And again, for our secondary families, we will be sending a survey at the end of this week with more specific details. Our administration at the middle school and high school are working on that survey. We will communicate to families, students, and staff about it. We will do the survey, as I said. We're still working with our labor partners to come up with some agreements about working conditions, and that we will gather that survey and develop cohorts and communicate the schedule with families, students, and staff. So tomorrow, as I mentioned, elementary staff will begin contacting families to confirm their choice for hybrid or CDL. And then the 29th through the 31st will be the teacher preparation and training, and there will be no school for elementary students. Thursday and Friday of that week will be 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. for distance learning. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to scroll back to some questions and see if I can answer them, and just either invite. I'm going to get through these questions in the chat, and once I am through those questions, I'll see if there are other verbal questions or questions in the chat. What is the procedure to identify and follow up on students who get on the school bus or enter the school building being sick with COVID? So there's really the methodology that we'll be using. This standard has changed. Originally, we were asked to ask specific questions of students and have parents ask those same questions. So the procedure first is that making sure our families know that we want you to check in with your child of how they're feeling in the morning before they come to school, or in the afternoon before they come to school. And then when a student comes to school, there are 2 entry screens. One is on the bus, of course, if they're riding the bus. The other would be when they enter the school. Most likely at each school, there will be different entrance procedures to make sure that we're not having students flow all through the same entrance point. So each of the schools will have a plan about what drop-off will look like. That will include what we call a visual check. where teachers are checking in with students. We are not asking them health questions in front of others because that is a violation of their rights, but we will be doing a visual check. If they are exhibiting symptoms, each of the schools have a specific room that's dedicated to what we'll call a wellness room, dedicated to isolate a student who is suspected of having symptoms. And then at that point, that begins the kind of official investigation as to whether or not the student would stay at school. In most cases, it will not allow the student to stay at school. But again, I know that there's a lot of sensitivity to, particularly young kids who might be sniffly, but we will look for those symptoms that you saw in the video, likely be contacting the family. We do have the ability to refer folks to our student-based health center to be tested for COVID. We do, and the schools will have access to the rapid test, which is called the Binex test, which is requires permission from the school to the family to conduct that rapid test. If the student is found to be infected, of course, our nurse would consult with the family and provide the quarantine time that the student would need to be out of school. And then contact tracing at the school level begins depending on who that student's been in contact with. So the reason to keep kids in cohorts where they're not going into mini cohorts, that really helps us identify where the student's been and who that student has been exposed to. Will we be sticking to the current school calendar, for example, last days of school? Yes, we will. I will say to everyone that we plan to offer more extensive summer opportunities, and we will be releasing that information as we get closer to summer. But we fortunately will be receiving some larger grants from the state to allow for extended learning opportunities all the way from elementary through high school. And we're working with our partners, our Sun schools and our culturally specific partners to offer some activity-based camps within, of course, the guidelines, the health and safety guidelines. Judy, how about Champions? Will it be transportation? Will it be at Prescott? So we met with Champions today. We're working on the details. We are trying to see if we can actually have Champions at both locations. One of our challenges is transportation because of the limited time in the afternoon. We are looking at two solutions. One solution is transporting students who are currently at Champions to their school. Frankly, Prescott has the most students at Russell. So our first ask was, can there be a program at Prescott? We don't make that decision on our, Parkrose doesn't make that decision. That is a Champions decision, but we have asked for that. If that's not available, we're looking at a transportation option where we could potentially provide transport to students from Russell to Prescott and back. That's a little less ideal, obviously, but we're hoping that parents who are having their kids go to Champions will at least have that option. Again, that is not fully worked out yet. And as soon as I know, I'll definitely share that. So Judy, I would suggest to you that I definitely want to capture this information because I want to be in contact with parents who specifically have questions about childcare in Parkrose. Yes, the kids, yes. Megan, we do plan to have the kids go outside, and that is the only environment change that they'll have is I think that our kids are excited to see each other. So I want to be sure that we are providing, without mixing cohorts, but time for students to play outside safely is part of our plan of how we would use some of the instructional time when they come to school. Sarah, if hybrid is chosen, what kinds of teaching or activities students will be doing during that week? Will it mostly be review, working on iReady, or direct teaching? Ideally, yes, recess. I do think that just that activity level for students will be important, but it won't be a lot of recess. It'll be, likely a 10 to 15 minute break in the middle of the 2 hour and 15 minute session. The other part will be I want the kids to be online as little as possible, to be honest, because they have spent so much time online. So there will be some review of concepts, of course, that have been hard for students to complete from home. But ideally, they're not doing, iReady is likely an asynchronous activity we'll ask students to do. But this will be more direct teaching of concepts that students need to review first and foremost. And then in addition to that, we hope to be able to connect students, the students that are attending. One of the things we've heard from families is just the social emotional component. So we want to be sure that we're providing opportunities for kids to interact at a safe distance and do some fun activities together in person. What do we know about the Living Skills program? Julie, I'm going to ask you to speak to that. Julie Sams is our Director of Student Services, and I'll have her answer that question.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Our life skills classes will follow the same hybrid schedule that they, depending on the school that they're at. So for example, if your student goes to the middle school, they will follow the middle school hybrid schedule. And that the middle school and high school is still being worked out at this point.
Can you provide any other details about Wednesdays? Will it be set time, and is there any instruction? It will start at 9 a.m., Harmony, and it will be 45 minutes to an hour. It will be a check-in. It'll be to kind of set the stage for what kids should be doing on Wednesday. But this is definitely a change, and this is due to because we are not providing more preparation time for teachers during the other 4 days. We need to provide them with additional time because of this lift of doing both modes of instruction. Do we get to pick what days for our child to go to school? You can let the teacher know what your preference is, but we can't guarantee the days. We can do all that we can to try and make that happen. We're going to just try to keep the numbers balanced. That's the most important thing. So know that it is important that you let your child's teacher know, or your children's teachers know of what your preference is, and we'll do our very best to accommodate. Cassie, I'm going to answer these questions in the chat, and then I'll come right back to you. Will there be leeway time for drop-off and pickup time for childcare providers who may? Yeah, there will be, I would say, traditional leeway, right? We want to prevent a lot of congregating of students. And so we really need to concentrate on keeping them spread out. And so at the beginning of the school day, in-person time, and the end of in-person time, we want to be sure that, we're just aware of what that leeway time is. When you say leeway, I'm assuming that's like a 10, 15-minute window, which is usually the coverage that we have that we can provide at the school level to make sure that students are supervised and safe when they're coming to school and leaving school. Sarah, upgrades or policies that have been made for increased ventilation, air exchange in the buildings. So our HVAC systems, so heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So there are many different approaches depending on the school. So most of our schools have what we call mechanical ventilation. So that's what we would consider HVAC. That is, and there's many layers to that are pretty complicated. But one is regulating the amount of fresh air that's coming into that system, meaning the amount of fresh air that's coming into the classroom. We are able to increase that to the maximum capacity that we're able. Again, every system's different, so it's not the same for every system because each of the schools are different age. The middle school is the newest and so most sophisticated. The other piece is there are filters that go into the HVACs. So there are filter ratings, and most all of our HVAC systems allow for what's called a MERV 13 filter. A MERV 13 filter is a microbial filter that actually helps filter viral particles more effectively than lower graded filters. So we're in process of doing that. I will let all of our families know that everything that is COVID related in terms of supplies, we are well equipped for cleaning and masks and all of those pieces. We are still waiting for filters to come because there is obviously a supply chain issue. But all of those upgrades are will be in place. The other component, for instance, if you're a Prescott parent or a high school parent, there are certain rooms that do not have mechanical ventilation. So in those schools, in those particular rooms, we will and are purchasing in-room Hepa filters. So those Hepa filters, important to note that if there's a Hepa filter in a room, we are only suggesting that windows are opened in a very limited manner, because Hepa filters recirculate that air in the classroom, and it does not work effectively if you have a lot of outside air coming in, because the Hepa filter is also going to be cleaning the outside air, which in turn just doesn't effectively clean the inside air. The more air it's cleaning, it takes more work. Hopefully that helps answer that question. Lots of upgrades and issues we're working on. Yeah, so back to Melanie. Yeah, we're going to do our best. I think the best thing to do is to communicate with your child's, your kid's teachers. I think that there is, by the nature of the middle school and high school, it's easier to spread kids out at the upper grades than it is at the elementary schools, where a lot of our elementaries are close to busy streets and condensed traffic. Can children attend just one of their 2 assigned days due to daycare schedule? Yes, Jessica, yes. I think you just make that choice and let the teacher know. We would not penalize you for not being able to be there one day. And if one day works for your family, we would like to accommodate you. All right, before I answer any of those, I know that there was a verbal question from Cassie. So Cassie, do you want to unmute and ask your questions?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yep.
I am a parent of a senior, and I just read the plan that was emailed today about the high school and the proposed plan, and I'm struggling with it, and my senior is struggling with it. It doesn't seem like it allows for a whole lot of instruction, in-person teaching. And what it seems like is what's going to happen is that they go to school maybe one day a week to get some in-person support. And I have a very disappointed senior, and I'm very disappointed. I mean, we've gone from 250 hours a week of instruction in a normal year to 120 hours of instruction during this year with COVID. And then now that's going to be further reduced to 2.5 hours in the morning from 4 hours. And he doesn't need any additional support in the afternoon. And I'm just kind of wondering like how this compares to Portland Public, which I heard has a more robust plan in terms of in-person instruction. It just feels like it has gotten worse, not better. And I recognize this is very challenging. But anyway, I was wondering if you could speak to any of that.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Kathy. And yeah, I don't want to pretend that like, hey, this is the best solution and this is the right solution. I think what we're trying to do is balance, and again, depending on how families respond, it really does depend on what that support when kids come to school will look like. Because we are, essentially we're looking at about, for seniors, your senior, about 6 weeks of school. And so one of the concerns was many of our seniors are currently working. And so that's one factor that we've heard from students, but I don't, in terms of comparing to other districts, I think what you'll see at bigger high schools across Multnomah County is that the days that students can attend in person. Now, there are some districts that are going to do simultaneous instruction, which means they're going to be teaching online and in person at the same time. And while many schools are doing that, it just hasn't proven to be, really, really effective in terms of the, kind of cost of time and effort. But I will take your feedback. I mean, one of the reasons we didn't want to come with a full plan tonight was because we know that parents like you have the same concerns and your child has the concern. And I'm particularly sad for our seniors, particularly because half of their, almost half of their year last year was changed. And then this year has been not ideal and not the way I would want any senior to have to spend their senior year. So we're trying to find a balance of schedule and otherwise with with our space at Parkrose High School, with our schedule, we could and have looked at an every other week model, but again, that's still reduced time and contact with teachers. So we're just kind of weighing like, what's the best way to support our kids? Let me go back. There will be, so Jen, there will be asynchronous assignments, but they will not have their teachers available, other than the teachers will communicate that asynchronous work through Seesaw for elementary. So technically they will not be getting online on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of the 29th through the 31st. Latanya, for Wednesdays. Wednesdays, like in many districts across the county, Wednesdays really will be just a check-in online for all students. We won't provide any in-person support on Wednesdays. That time will be intended for preparation. Policy for mask wearing. So the policy for mask wearing is masks must be worn unless there is a medical exception or a disability that deems that the mask cannot be worn. And then there are accommodations the school district needs to make for that student and the class that they're in order to keep everybody safe. The school has access to KN95 masks. We do not have the N95 masks for kids. But we have the KN95 and we do have them at the school sites, and they can be requested for kids and families. We do have quite a stock of those masks. Procedure for kids who can't wear them. The can't is really looking at accommodations. The Ready School Safe Learners guidelines have specific accommodations that we can provide to that student and the students around them, which have to do with increased space without isolating the student who can't wear the mask, ventilation factors. All of those are things that are considered in the case of a student who can't. If a student who won't wear the mask, they can't attend in person if they won't wear a mask. They will have to do distance learning as their choice, and that would be the consequence if they said, we're not going to come in and wear a mask. We do have 2 nurses in the district. There will not be, I'm hopeful that we'll actually have health assistants at all the schools in the fall. The recent federal relief that was passed just a week ago is going to provide funding for schools to be able to provide that increased service. We did increase our nursing service this year, but there aren't enough nurses to go around the entire district due to, unfortunately, the cost. So the check for symptoms, Julie, do you want to just talk about what the procedure is for a teacher who has suspects a student who's not feeling well?
Yeah, basically the student would, the teacher, if it was in the classroom, the teacher would call down to the office, or that student could be walked down to the office. And like Michael referenced, we have designated rooms, well, whether they're called wellness rooms or care rooms, that we would supervise the student. If they did show 1 or more signs of COVID, then we would contact the parent or guardian and have that student picked up. And then we would have the nurse follow up with the family to see kind of what progressed as far as an illness. And then if we needed to, if it was a presumed case of COVID or a confirmed case of COVID, then we would start our contact tracing.
One question that came up in the Q&A about, kind of our discussions around high school, and Cassie, I'll definitely take your comments back to the team, is we were planning to start at the same time because we know that students have gotten in the routine of starting class at 10 a.m. So that was the original plan. And I'm definitely doing this listening session tonight to take feedback for myself, but also to go back to the secondary team to talk with them about feedback that we've received tonight. So Jeanette, yes, I absolutely agree with you. I think that movement and social emotional learning we want that to be a primary focus for kids coming in person. I think that we'll be able to increase that time as we get into the routine of school. I think that our challenge is just getting the kids into the routine, but I am highly encouraging for all of our schools to get, the kids socializing and playing. So there is room for that. I think in the first couple of weeks, we just want to make sure that we're teaching the kids the routines of safety, particularly hand washing before they enter the room and anytime they leave the room, that we're creating those good hygiene habits at school. Sarah, yes, I was hoping for more than 4.5 hours a week too. What would need to happen for those hours to increase? There's two things. One of the challenges that all schools are presented with is the challenge of doing both distance learning and in-person instruction. And so going back to Cassie's comment about, the high school, uniquely in our community is actually pretty split at this point, whether they want to send their kids back to in-person instruction. And I do think over time, as vaccinations increase, as safety protocols are followed, folks will see, hey, we can do this. The schools can pull this off. There's a couple of scenarios. One scenario is if CDL students aren't coming back into hybrid. If we just had 55% of our students, to be honest, the students could come to school for that 2.5 hours every day and likely more. The problem is we need to keep room for all the kids in case 100% of our families say we want to come back. The other change that could happen, and I will say it possibly could happen this year, but could change the minds of some families, is the federal, the CDC and the Oregon Health Authority are looking at the distancing standards particularly for young students in our schools. If there were 3 feet versus 6 feet, that would allow us to have more kids in class and then would allow for a much more robust schedule to be offered because we wouldn't, instead of 12 kids in a classroom, we could have 20 kids in a classroom. So that's, that's a key piece. Thanks, Sarah. One child that doesn't want to return and one that does, wants to return and one that does not. How do I, so when you're asked the question, you will be contacted by each of your children's teachers. So you just want to let them know specifically for each child that, for one of them, they want to come and the other one wants to stay home and do distance learning. That is perfectly fine. You do not have to have your children do the same thing. That definitely is your option, and you would just need to inform your child's teacher that that's what you'd like to do. It looks like we have Kim who has a question. So can we have Kim go ahead and ask your question, Kim? You can unmute Kim and ask your question. All right, we'll just wait and see if Kim comes back online. Any other questions from folks in the audience? Suzanne, my daughter's a senior. Can she do? Yes, Suzanne, yes. Your daughter is an example of what we've heard from a lot of families. One of the reasons that we have, a different schedule than some of other high schools, along with just kind of the split and, folks' feelings about coming back to school. So yes, she will be able to maintain her work schedule and still meet graduation requirements. We are making accommodations for, students who have unique work schedules, so they aren't having to change their work schedule. Bus routes. Yes, the bus routes will be running, and we will be, as I said in the beginning, some stops are pretty full, and we may need to design cohorts based on maybe certain bus stops, but we're going to try to accommodate all the needs that we can. We're still working as to, what that would look like. Harmony, details on food service. So students who are distance learning, they will be able to pick up lunches on site between 11:30 and 12:15 each day. Students who come to school on the days that they're coming to school, they will be given a lunch when they leave school that will be provided to them as they walk out the door. And that is just because we aren't going to mix cohorts in the cafeteria at this time. That could change in the future, but at this point in time, we're not going to do that. On days that they're not going to be there, we will be sending multiple meals with them. Families can pick up meals. And if you have a student who is coming in person, and we do want the kids to eat before they come to school versus coming to school and pick up their meal, we're, as we get into the routine of this, they'll get their next day's meal the afternoon that they leave. I do think that we will get to a point where we can start having kids eat in their classrooms as we get the routines and the safety protocols down, but we just felt like it was a lot to start with. Yeah, does Parkrose plan to run Oaks testing this year? So the state of Oregon has requested a waiver from the federal government to not do state tests this year. We have heard that waiver has not been approved yet, and it may not be approved, and that may require districts to offer testing. I will speak from my own kind of position as superintendent. I do not think it's a good use of our in-person time to give a statewide test, considering the circumstances of this year. Keep in mind, in Oregon, parents have the option to opt out of taking the test. And we will make sure that if we are required to give the test, that parents are informed of their choice of whether they would like their kid to take the test or not. Will the district suffer funding wise if we choose not to send? No, we won't. The only thing we would suffer funding wise is if we weren't offering universal access for all students. But at the same time, we won't suffer funding if kids aren't coming onto campus. We will hopefully welcome everybody back with safety guidelines tomorrow. Next year, be able to come back and fully in person. Will pre-SATs be done at the high school? I know that there will be the college board who gives the SATs. They are, now that we're in more moderate risk in Multnomah County, we will be able to offer SAT opportunities. And for those of you who've been in the district for a while know that we have, tried to provide a free opportunity for kids to be able to do that. And I think that there will be some spring options for that. What's the district doing to support staff members who may have elevated risk factors or extenuating home circumstances? So what we are doing with our staff is we do have some staff, as I mentioned earlier, that have medical exceptions. And those medical exceptions do require them to stay home and do distance learning, and that will be the only option. And we will have work for them to do from home. We do have teachers and other staff who have extenuating circumstances We are providing flexibility in the morning hours so that if a staff member needs to work from home, we are allowing them to do distance learning from home. But for our staff in the afternoons, we will require staff to be in person. Our specialists, special educators, some of them will be providing in-person support, and some of them will be doing, a lot of them will be giving specific online support, because we won't have our kids going to music or other classes this spring. We're hopefully we'll be back into a rotation in the fall, but not this spring. And for some staff, there are some folks that are having to adjust schedules. We are in the toughest scenarios. If a staff member can't work with that flexibility within reason, then we are offering leave to our staff, but we aren't requiring it. We're just asking them to try, with the accommodations, to try their best to meet the needs of the district and their own needs as best they can. If a teacher needs to be out sick, we will, in some scenarios, we will have other staff cover particularly for the in-person, but we will have substitutes that we can call in. So we won't be in a situation, unless there was a transmission, where we would ask kids to stay home. All right, I think we may have another hand raised out there. Go ahead. The person who has their hand raised, could you unmute and let us know what your question is? Amelsum, I think it is. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. All right, we'll just wait for a moment, see if that person unmutes. Any other questions? Sarah, did I cover any questions are there any questions I didn't cover?
No, I think you got most of them.
So for our secondary families, Cassie, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm going to put in the chat here, and it was in my letter today. And this also ties to Judy, and I think there was another question around champions, around childcare and transportation. Please, I really appreciate if you would just send me a note with your concerns, because I do want to make sure that we're trying our best, right? Like Cassie, I can't make any promises, but I do hear you and understand the disappointment that you have and your son. We want the last couple months of school to be, we are planning events for seniors and things for our seniors to do. We're hopeful that we can have a more of a semblance of a graduation this year, because we had a drive-through graduation last year. So we have some ideas, depending on the risk level in the county, as to what we'll do for our seniors. But I know that it's not ideal, and I wish it were more ideal. Any other questions? All right. Well, I want to thank our interpreters for being with us tonight. Thank you for your time. And I want to thank everybody who took the time out of their Tuesday evening to come and join us. And more information to come for our secondary families and our elementary families. Look forward to hearing from your child's teacher. Just want to thank you for your patience and support through all of this. I know it hasn't been easy. Yes, so there's a quick summer school question, and we are going to have some summer programs at each of the schools. So we will have more information about summer programming coming out to you soon. And the paperwork to opt out for the remainder of the year, I would need clarification on what that is. Is that opting out of testing? Is that opting out of school? I need a little more clarification on that part of the question. All right. I just want to say thank you again. And we likely will circle back, particularly before secondary schools opting to stay homeschool. Yeah. So what I would suggest is that the questions at Parkrose, if you would email us and just let us know what your intention is, we can help you with whatever resources you might need. And then if you're talking about distance learning, I just can help clarify what you're needing and how we can help support you and your family. All right. I want to say thanks to our panelists for being there to help me tonight. Appreciate it. And I'll say good night to everyone. We'll be back in touch soon. Thanks so much.